Welcome to the Fear and Greed Daily Interview. I'm Sean Aylmer. Purpose would have to be one of the top corporate buzzwords of the last decade or two, right up there with mission and vision statements and things. But does it actually matter what the purpose of your business is? Could your purpose just be to make a profit? Ben Bars is an econometrician who's helped some of the world's biggest brands define and reinvent themselves. Mars, Woolworths, KFC, Rolls-Royce and Virgin, to name a few. Ben's the CEO of consulting agency We Are Unity, and he says it's time to call BS on purpose. Ben, welcome to Fear and Greed.
Thanks, Sean. Good to be here.
I have been, over the last 20 years, mostly I have worked in big corporates. I've been to so many sessions on purpose and vision and stuff like that. Are you trying to tell me today that maybe it wasn't all it was cracked up to be?
Well, look, I mean, it's an interesting way to put it, but I think it probably relates to people putting, lofty statements out there and not really doing much with them. I think, with things like purpose and vision, it's about intent, it's about action, it's about measurable, tangible planning, as opposed to just putting some feel-good stuff out there and hoping that provides some sort of value.
Okay, so should a company actually define its purpose, like spend time defining its purpose? That's the first part of the question. But then I suppose the second part is, if it's not going to, then just put it in a drawer. They need to actually do something about it.
Yeah, so it's all good and well having a purpose, but how are you using it, right? And I think, since COVID, it's really accelerated the need for purpose in many ways. Most of Australians were sitting at home behind a camera, wondering whether life was fulfilling and what they did had meaning, and that put a lot of pressure on corporates through the Great Resignation, etc. And it sort of forced organisations to really take a good hard look at why they exist and why that matters and what role they play, because not just employees, but equally consumers. I think customers are 6 times more likely to buy from a purpose-driven organisation. And so health pressures with COVID, economic pressures as a result, etc., have really put purpose and culture front and centre for most of corporate Australia.
So when we're talking about purpose, I think I know what you're talking about. But just describe to me so when you go and work for one of these big organisations, what are they asking you to help them with?
Yeah, so I think the best way to look at it is getting really clear on why you exist, not what you do, but why you exist, right? And the reason that's important is because if you understand why you exist, you can provide your stakeholders, so that means shareholders, that means investors, that means government regulators, that means customers, employees, etc. You can provide those stakeholders with context for the decisions that you make. And that's really important because without context, people can't appreciate, acknowledge or support the decisions you're making. And that purpose, that reason for existing, that's really quite timeless, and it sets a foundation for a company's focus and future direction. Most of the Australian organisations are very short-term focused. So what that means is they're geared towards operational efficiency, and that behaviour is all about cost minimisation as opposed to investing for the future. And as we've seen, Australia's innovation index has really dropped off compared to a lot of other companies around the world, and that's because we're not consciously self-disrupting and remaining relevant. And so when you've got a strong purpose and everyone's clear on why you exist, it really sets a more meaningful foundation for the future focus of the business, its strategy, its brand, its culture. It's sort of core to everything else. And unfortunately, most of those components, brand, culture, strategy, get designed in isolation in most of corporate Australia, and that's why they don't sort of work together.
It is okay then to have a purpose to make money. That doesn't mean, that's not a bad that your purpose is to make money, because what flows from that, the behaviours and culture and all that, if it flows from that, may be quite impressive how that works. But my question is, can you just have that purpose of the main purpose is to make money?
Yeah, look, if that's your purpose, and some of the banks might lean into that that purpose quite specifically, but at least they're clear on why they exist. And if the reason they exist is to make money, then that's how they make decisions. That's how they'll design their culture, and that's what they'll, build and design their brand around being known for. And if they're okay with that, and their shareholders are okay with that, then absolutely that's what they should stand for. I think it's being clear on why you exist and what you stand for, and then everything else will need to line up behind that. And I think there can be some confusion around purpose being purpose for good, and that's okay too if that's why you exist. But it's hard to do that if you don't have profit to support that too, right? So I think it's important to be very clear on what the intent of that purpose is, so that you can ladder up all your investments to it.
Stay with me, Ben. We'll be back in a minute. My guest this morning is Ben Bars, CEO of We Are Unity. So how does everything else, mission, values, that sort of thing flow from purpose? Once you've got your purpose, you know what that is. Brand is another thing you were talking about. How do they flow from it?
Yeah, so typically, if you think about purpose as being the why, the next logical thing to work on is the where. Where are we going as a business? And that's typically viewed as vision. And that typically sits in a sort of 5 to 7 year timeline. And the reason for that is to give the company some long-term thinking and to balance out that short-term behavior, so that there's a longer-term aspiration. And that's something that people and investors particularly can get excited about. There's a longer-term plan, and it's a collective goal. And a lot of companies complain that they're struggling with, silos and different parts of the organization working in isolation. And so vision really provides that collective goal and energy. From there, you then need to develop your business strategy, and that typically sits in a sort of 24 to 36 month time frame. That's more about prioritization, decision making, and making the organization really clear on what we need to do first, next, and last. Once you've got that strategy and the vision and the purpose in place, you can then start focusing on your brand, which is actually what do we want to be known for in the market, and how do we design that? How do we articulate that? How do we bring that to life with our customers and the broader community? And then the final piece, once you have your purpose, your vision, your strategy, and your brand in place, you need to determine what culture you need. So what we mean by that is, what are the collective mindsets and behaviors in the organization that will allow that brand to live and allow the organization to execute its strategy, deliver on the vision, and live its purpose. And so, there's a bit of coordinating to do. And unfortunately, a lot of these components get designed by different departments at different times. Marketing might be over here working on sales, and HR is working on chasing engagement scores. The CFO might be very financially focused on the strategy. And so you get, all these different components being designed in different languages by different functions. And so our role is really to look at how do we use purpose to bring some unity and some commercial alignment with all these building blocks.
Is there an example you can give, even if you don't want to name the company, where you've seen it done really well, or do most places not do it well?
Yeah, so look, it's a mixed bag. A lot of organizations have invested a lot of time in purpose, but have they done much with it? That's the big thing. There was an FMCG company recently, and in the exec meeting, they were going to double down on ready-to-make drinks in that market. And the CFO actually raised their purpose in the meeting and said, hey, listen, there's a lot of issues with ready-to-make drinks in the market. We've got age issues, we've got issues in the cross around crime related to alcohol. Do we really want to, as a business, invest in something that's got a lot of negative shadow side? And with that purpose conversation, the exec team actually ended up doubling down on craft beer instead.
Right.
Yeah, and what's been interesting is the craft beer sector has grown hugely, and the ready-to-make drinks, the RTD market, has actually declined quite significantly. So it's a really quite a lovely example of an Australian company using its purpose to guide its investment decision making, which is really nicely paid off.
So I kind of started this conversation suggesting we don't need a purpose, but what you're really saying is everyone needs a North Star. Everyone needs to understand the purpose, because then the other decisions can come from that.
Yeah, another way to look at it is just to understand the why. Without context, it's so hard to appreciate any decision or to make a decision. So if the context is timeless and it is macro, not micro, and you can emotionally connect to it, not just rationally connect to it, you're going to get a lot more buy-in from all the people that need to make that organization successful, whether it's investors, customers, or employees.
Okay, so Ben, what's step one if I'm a company listening to this and I think, I don't really know exactly what the purpose is, or I do know what it is, but I'm not sure that I've told everyone else in the company about
Yep.
it.
Yep.
What is step one?
Yeah, right. So, do you know what? The best question to start off with the board and the exec team, is to actually have a group discussion about what would the world be missing out on if we didn't exist.
Mm.
Yeah, it's a hard question to answer, and it really sort of makes people stop and think. But it's a really important one, because if you can't articulate it, then you're not very convincing or confident in the value of your organization. And that's typically a really important starting point. And so where we'd go from there is to actually interview different stakeholders. So we'd interview investors, we'd speak to customers, we'd speak to shareholders, government regulators, employees, and actually have that conversation with them to see where the consistency is, where the aspiration is, the ambition, the emotional connection around why the organization exists. And then we'd use that to start distilling down what we believe the reason for the organization's existence could be. And then you would start to look at how could that as a platform be used to start informing the decisions we make.
Ben, I imagine companies with a purpose at the end of the day, they probably do better than those without. Just listening to you talk that through, it just makes people aware of why they're going to work every day.
Yeah, that's right. And we've seen it with some of the extreme brands like Patagonia, whose purpose is save the planet, but it has a huge implication on their price modeling, their supplier strategy, and also their customer loyalty. And even locally with amazing organisations like Woolworths, who are all about a better tomorrow, and the decisions they make to line up behind what that means in their role in society, beyond just being a business. And we've actually ranked the ASX 200 based on cultural strength, looking at alignment to purpose. And what we found is that out of the ASX 200, the companies that are culturally more purpose-led are outperforming the market by 29%.
Wow. Ben, thank you for talking to Fear and Greed.
Pleasure. Absolute pleasure.
That was Ben Bars, Chief Executive Officer of We Are Unity. This is the Fear and Greed Daily Interview. Join us every morning for the full episode of Fear and Greed, Australia's most popular business podcast. I'm Sean Aylmer. Enjoy your day.